Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a case that honestly is one of the most chilling and, for a long time, frustrating cold cases in American crime history. We're going back to Austin, Texas, December 6, 1991, the Austin Yogurt Shop murders. It's just brutal. Four young women, Amy Ayers, who was only 13, Eliza Thomas, 17, and sisters Jennifer and Sarah Harbison, 17 and 15, found bound, gagged, shot. And then the whole place was set on fire. For more than 30 years, this case has been this awful monument to tragedy, but also, frankly, to investigative dead ends and a really painful miscarriage of justice early on. But things have changed. We've got a stack of sources here detailing a really dramatic, pretty recent breakthrough announced just this September 2025, a DNA match. So our mission today is to unpack this, look at the science, figure out what this new evidence actually tells us, and what it means for accountability, for justice, and maybe finally setting the record straight after all this time.
Yeah, and that history you mentioned is so crucial. You really can't grasp how significant this breakthrough feels without understanding just how dark and confusing the past 30-plus years have been on this case. It wasn't just cold. It was deeply controversial. There were errors, accusations flew about coerced confessions. It really damaged people's faith in the investigation for a long time.
Okay, yeah, let's definitely start there. Because the breakthrough isn't just about finding an answer, it's about correcting a wrong answer that stood for years. The initial investigation, it zeroed in on some local teens, right? Led to arrests, even convictions. How did it go so wrong so fast?
Well, the sources suggest the primary failure point early on was really a heavy reliance on interrogation techniques that, let's just say, produced confessions that didn't hold up. The focus fell on guys like Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. They were arrested, tried, and convicted. It was largely based on these confessions they later insisted very strongly were forced out of them, coerced under intense police pressure.
And the physical evidence back then, it didn't really help clarify things, did it? It almost muddied the waters more.
Exactly. The forensics in the early 90s, they struggled big time.
Yeah.
The scene itself was a nightmare. First, the fire deliberately set to destroy evidence, then soaked with water by the firefighters. So any DNA, if you could even find it, was often severely degraded, fragmented. You get these complex mixtures that were just inconclusive with the technology they had.
So you've got these questionable confessions, which the accused say were forced, and then physical evidence that's too damaged to confirm or deny anything definitively. That really is a recipe for disaster, isn't it? The human element fails, and the science can't bail it out.
That's a really good way to put it. And eventually, the courts did recognize the problems. Springsteen's conviction, overturned in 2006. Scott's followed in 2007. By 2009, all the charges against them were dismissed, and a key reason was that the DNA they could analyze, even partially, didn't match them. So the case just stalled. It went cold not just from lack of leads, but because the history was so messy and the evidence seemed like a dead end.
Right, which just underscores why this new breakthrough needed to be rock solid. Scientifically undeniable, something to finally cut through all that past confusion and pain. And that brings us, finally, to September 2025. Must have been just a massive shockwave in Austin when the police announced they had a significant breakthrough.
It really was. And what's interesting looking at the sources is that the breakthrough wasn't just one thing. It was using new tools on old evidence and getting this sort of double confirmation, forensically speaking.
Okay, let's get into it. The individual they linked, Robert Eugene Brashers. Now, he wasn't one of the original group of suspects, and he's deceased. What's his story?
Right, Brashers is a very different profile. He was known to law enforcement as a violent criminal, a serial killer, actually. Later DNA work linked him to other murders, other violent crimes in multiple states. But he died back in 1999, killed himself during a police standoff in Missouri. So interestingly, he was already dead before Springsteen and Scott even had their convictions formally overturned. His name surfaced now because of really advanced DNA testing.
Okay, hang on. Advanced DNA testing. Let's dive into that because that's key. This isn't just running a sample through CODIS, the standard FBI database, right? Because presumably they tried that years ago if they had a usable profile. Are we talking about the genetic genealogy stuff like people use for ancestry tracing? How do police even get access to that?
That's precisely it. It's investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. Standard DNA tests often fail here because the samples were, like I said, degraded or mixed. IgG works differently. It looks at hundreds of thousands of genetic markers, SNPs, to build out a family tree, essentially. So, law enforcement, working with specialized labs and needing specific warrants, can upload an unknown profile, in this case the male DNA found on one of the victims, to certain public genealogy databases, places like GED Match. They don't get the suspect's name directly. What they get are potential relatives, maybe distant cousins. Then forensic genealogists do the painstaking work of building family trees back and then forward, trying to identify someone who could be the source of that DNA, considering timelines, geography.
Wow. So using family connections, potentially distant ones, to eventually pinpoint an individual, that's incredible. And that process led them to Robert Eugene Brashers from the DNA found on one of the girls.
Correct. The IgG pointed towards Brashers. But here's the part that makes the case so compelling now, the second piece that really locks it in, especially given the history. They found ballistic evidence, too.
Ballistics? After all this time, how?
It sounds like incredible luck, but it's more about just relentless re-examination of everything. They found a bullet casing. It was recovered way back when, apparently from a drain at the yogurt shop, maybe overlooked or deemed unusable before. They reanalyzed it using modern techniques. And get this, forensic ballistics matched that casing to the exact same gun Brashers used when he killed himself in that Missouri standoff in 1999.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
That's huge. So the DNA links him biologically to a victim at the scene, and the ballistics link his specific weapon, the one he died with years later in another state, directly to the crime scene itself.
Exactly. That combination is incredibly powerful. It's what gives the police the confidence to say Brashers was involved. And crucially, this new DNA analysis also definitively excludes the original suspects, Springsteen, Scott, and others initially investigated, like Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wilborn. It confirms they were not the source of that male DNA profile, finally correcting that historical record.
Okay, so a major historical injustice corrected, a perpetrator identified through powerful science. But the Austin Police Department, in their announcement, they called it a major breakthrough, but we're clear the case remains open and ongoing. Why? If they know who did it, why isn't it closed?
The main reason is simple. Brashers is dead. There can be no trial. No courtroom process where this evidence is presented, challenged by a defense, cross-examined, and validated by a jury verdict. So the resolution here isn't legal prosecution. It shifts to historical accountability, providing answers and closure for the families. And because there's no trial, the forensic evidence, the IgG work, the ballistics match, the handling of those very old samples, faces intense scrutiny. From other experts, from the public. Given the past mistakes, the APD basically has to prove its case publicly, beyond any doubt, without the formal setting of a courtroom. Transparency becomes absolutely critical.
Yeah, I can see that, especially dealing with evidence that's, 34 years old now. The chain of custody, potential contamination over decades, those are huge hurdles to clear convincingly, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly complex. They need to demonstrate the integrity of that evidence trail, from 1991 right through to the 2025 analysis, show that nothing compromised the samples in a way that could affect the IgG results or the ballistics match. It's a massive undertaking.
And beyond just validating the Brashers link, what else does open and ongoing mean? What are investigators still looking for?
Well, there's still some pretty big unanswered questions. First, Brashers himself. He was known to move around, but sources say he had no clear documented connection to Austin in December 91. So why was he there? What was the motive? How did he end up targeting that specific yogurt shop? They need to try and map his movements.
Okay, motive and opportunity. What else?
Second is that forensic reliability we just talked about, really buttoning up every aspect of the evidence handling and analysis. And third, perhaps the biggest question still hanging out there, was he alone? The nature of the crime scene, 4 victims, bound, gagged, the fire, it sounds complex. Could there have been accomplices? Are there other individuals involved who might still be alive?
Ah, right. The co-conspirator question. That definitely keeps a case open.
It has to. Identifying Brashers is monumental, but it might not be the entire story of what happened that night. To achieve full closure, especially for the families, the investigation needs to be certain about whether anyone else was involved. Public trust, given the history here, demands they pursue that angle thoroughly.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. It's been such a long, painful road. Started with the horrific crime in 91. Then years, decades really, marred by false leads, confessions later called coerced, convictions overturned, a real erosion of trust. Then finally, September 2025, this breakthrough.
Right. Using advanced investigative genetic genealogy combined with modern forensic ballistics, investigators definitively identified Robert Eugene Brashers, a known serial killer who died in 1999, as being involved in the murders of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison. A name is finally linked. The historical injustice regarding the initial suspects is corrected. But yeah, the investigation still has work to do.
So what does it all mean? Identifying the likely perpetrator after 34 years is, well, it's a huge step for truth. It offers a form of accountability the families have desperately needed. But since there's no trial, the burden really shifts, doesn't it? It's now about public validation, forensic transparency, expert review, and the fact that the case remains open really leaves us with a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. When a cold case like this gets solved but the identified suspect is deceased, how do authorities find true closure legally, ethically, especially when that big question of potential accomplices hangs in the air? How do you close the book when you might not know the whole story? That's the challenge Austin faces now.